once again to Senior Focus. I'm your host, Bill Adams. Senior Focus is a show designed for adults over the age of about 50 or so, but of course, if you're younger than that, feel free to stay tuned. I think today we'll have a subject that might be interesting to people of all ages. We're coming to you from the Austintown Library, and I want to thank the library system for allowing us to use their public meeting room, and also I want to thank Greg Roten from Armstrong Local Cable Programming, and he allows us to get on the air. If you miss any of the show, you can always go to YouTube and just type in Armstrong Cable and Senior Focus, and there's a whole number of shows that are online for you to watch. Today we're going to be talking with two guests, and as you see them from right to left, we have Mike Heher, and Mike is the president of local Mahoning County
chapter. The Ohio Genealogical Society.
There you go, that's the official.
Officially.
And Stacy Adger, who is the trustee for the local Youngstown region for the Ohio Genealogical Society. Is that right? Okay. And before we get started, I wanted to just read something off of the website that the Mahoning County chapter has. And this comes from Cicero. And if you're not up on your Roman history, he was an author and statesman in Rome. But he said, "To be ignorant of what occurred before you were born is to remain always a child. For what is the worth of human life unless it is woven into the life of our ancestors by the records of history?" So obviously the ancients and the Romans and the Greeks knew that history was important. And in this case, we're talking about our family history, our local history. And Mike, if you want to just talk about, at the beginning, we'll let people know, and we'll do this towards the end too. If people are interested, as they hear the show, where are you located and how can people get involved with the chapter?
Yes, we meet on the third Monday of every month, except December, July, and August. Okay. It's St. Charles Administration Building. It's the right connected to the church, and you come over there at 7 o'clock. Okay. And everyone is welcome. You don't have to, we'd be glad to have you as a member, but you don't have to join. You can just go and participate and sit and listen. We have a meeting that lasts maybe a half hour. Then we have a guest speaker on some genealogy or history. And then we have cookies and coffee, and you sit around and ask questions, and we have plenty of people that can help you try to unearth your past.
So this would be a great place to get started. I know a lot of people get interested in their family history, and I guess, and maybe we could talk about this during the show about what might trigger that, in a person's life. But again, they could come no matter what, if they're a member or not. They just come to the meeting and like, for instance, I think the next meeting coming up this month is with the local judge. Is that correct?
Yes, Judge Rushu, who is the common pleas judge, or probate judge. Right. And a lot of the records that we do research on come from that court. And he is just an incredible person to work with. And we have volunteers at the courthouse every Thursday morning that can aid you and help you do that. And I know,
Stacy, you've been a volunteer for years with not only at the courthouse, they're volunteers, but they're also at the library?
Correct. On Thursday afternoons as well, we have volunteers that are there to help people with the actual hands-on. So they get a chance to go sit down with the volunteer, look through records, go online, use the library computers that are in the main genealogy section of the library, and go through the records and learn and sort of fill out their family story. And that's great fun. It's nice to see the number of people that we get on an average Thursday, because it grows, it continues to grow, because a lot of people are interested. One thing Mike touched on with Judge Rusu coming, and it was during my presidency. But Mahoning County met with a representative from FamilySearch.org, and they are currently in the process of digitizing records that are in fragile condition that are for Mahoning County. So these records range from marriage records to a variety of other records that have been in the courthouse, and they're going to be put online eventually, so that when you're doing research and doing genealogy, you can actually go online and look for it. Not every record's online, so you have to still do the labor part. But, and Judge Russo was a leading guiding force in that, because he is really concerned about making sure that the records are preserved, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, and both of you, I imagine, have been involved in genealogical research for a number of years.
Yeah, I started 40 years ago.
Oh, well, that's a number.
That's a number of years, yes.
Yeah, and so you've seen the big change with the advent of computerized data.
Yes, you used to have to go to the courthouses and to the libraries and just sit with microfilm and just keep turning and turning and turning, because there was no index. So you spend hours and hours trying to do that. And it's come a long way. This
is facetious, but was there an injury, like, you have tennis elbow, but
Yes.
you would have maybe tennis or genealogical wrist or something?
We're going to have to check into that, though, because, that's very possible.
Yeah. Well, it brings up a good point. Maybe, Mike, starting with you. You said you got started maybe 40 years ago or so.
Yes.
What triggered your interest? How did you get started?
Yeah, back in, just before the bicentennial, 1976, an author, John Jakes, put out a series of books. Okay. The Bastard, the Seekers, the Rebels, and it was tracing Philip Kent, who was born illegitimately in France, came to the United States and participated in the Revolution, in the Alamo, in the Civil War, all the way up to present time. And I got to thinking, I have 3 daughters, and if I go back just 5 generations, that is my grandparents' grandparents, there's 32 different last names.
Wow.
And I said, my goal was just to find those 32 names. I thought that would be pretty simple because my wife's grandfather and my grandfather were still living, and you could ask them questions. But it was amazing how people forget.
Yeah.
And so that was my goal, just to trace those 32 names, and then I got more involved and more involved. I found 31, by the way.
Oh, still looking for one?
I'm still looking for one.
Someone's still missing, huh?
How about you, Stacy?
I got started basically out of concern for a medical issue. We had always heard that the women on my mother's side of the family passed away from stomach-related illnesses, and I'm the eldest of 4 girls, so we started looking and digging. I knew that my great-great-grandfather founded Third Baptist Church, which is the oldest African-American church still in existence here in the Youngstown area. But looking and learning more about him and the different families and the branches and everything, it's just been fascinating. I was at a genealogy conference in Springfield, Illinois, and actually had to, on my way home, have the opportunity of going and attending a church that my great-great-grandfather was involved in starting in 1881 in Brazil, Indiana.
Is
so
that right?
was cool. And then just last week, I made contact with the first cousin. He's like a 5th or 6th cousin who is actually from Nigeria. So they're actually having people doing DNA testing, which is a whole completely different aspect to genealogy. And I've actually met up, or at least had conversations with a cousin who is from Africa. So it's been really great.
Yeah.
With African American research, it's a little harder with the records and everything. I've only gotten back to like two generations. But there's always hope that I can fill in those missing spaces.
And Mike, have you been able to go around the area or the state, the country, to see some of these relatives, or do you keep in contact somehow online?
It's amazing because online, especially, I've met I don't know how many people, and what happened is some of my research got online, and it went through Ancestry, so I started getting all kinds of inquiries from people. I had one gentleman, we were talking, he was my wife's distant cousin, and he had to put in an inquiry. He was looking for a certain relative ancestor, and I sent him a note and said, here it is. Turns out he lived in Vermont, and then I talked to him, and then all of a sudden nothing happened. Well, it turned out his house burnt down, and it took him 6 months, and eventually we met at McDonald's in Mercer for coffee, and I showed him where the relatives were buried.
That's great.
So it was, so you never know. Met all over the country, I've met people.
Well, and I just thought, again, facetiously, another benefit of this is boy, you get a place to stay in a lot of places. You know, once you know, if you're on good terms with your family, it's like possibly you could make travel arrangements to go visit. And you've done that, right? You've gone to a lot of reunions.
I'm very big on the reunions because it gives you a chance to not only meet the relatives that you know, but the older relatives who have the stories, who have the information. And it's so important to make sure that you get to them before they pass away, because each ancestor, each older relative is like a book. Once they pass, that book, it's closed, that
Right.
tree, it's gone.
Yeah.
And you lose some of the vital information that they have. So yeah, I make it a point of going to so many. I'm going to one is Shreveport, Louisiana this coming year, and it's with the hopes of introducing another cousin and filling in some of this particular branch's tree. So it's going to be fascinating.
Well, you know, that brings up an idea, or I don't know if it's been done in the area. I know certain teachers will maybe encourage their students to go interview relatives, but do you know of anything like that in the Youngstown area, Mahoning County, where there's like a concerted effort where maybe the younger generation would work with older adults?
I think it's kind of hit and miss depending on the teacher. What we did have, 4-H does a lot it.
Oh, good.
And our members have participated as judges in judging their genealogy research. So in that regard, it has. What really happens is people don't seem to get interested till they get older. And by that time, a lot have passed away.
Yeah.
One thing I will say that if you're talking to ancestors or your older relatives and they tell you a story, write it down. Now, it may be that story isn't right, but there's some aspects of that story that will be correct. And so just to have that written down someplace and documented is really, really important for you.
Well, and even a step further, and sometimes I know this is hard just from personal experience, but if you could record the person, you know, either an audio recording, and wouldn't that be great to have the person's, you know, voice? A lot of, you know, again, I've got relatives, I can't remember their voice because they died and we never had them on tape. This is, you know, decades before. But to put people on video even, you know.
Absolutely. A lot of people aren't comfortable with that, but if you can talk them into it or do it, or just do it so casually,
Right.
Would be a great asset, yes.
Right.
You know, and it was so neat. My dad, when I was growing up, would always chase people around with this 8mm camera, and we had relatives that would run from him and everything. And we had one relative who was Gullah Geechee, and so her accent was very strong, very pronounced. She was from the islands along the South Carolina coast.
Okay.
And me being young, I kind of remember her voice, and recently I got some of the film transferred over, and to sit and hear her voice again after all those many years was just fantastic.
Yeah.
So it, like you said, audio recordings, if you could get them video recordings, they just add more to the story. It's
Sure.
great to have them.
Well, there are some things, though, that I know local members of the Mahoning County chapter have worked on, and you have an example here. Your members produce books.
Yes, for years. This is one of our books on Calvary Cemetery, and there's several volumes of that. But not just this book, but we've done Oak Hill and many, many cemeteries throughout Mahoning County.
Okay.
And I will tell you, one of the big things that you think of in genealogy is documentation. You have to do the best job you can. So many people, they see a name. Well, there may be, I know that there's several Mike Hehers in the country, and so if somebody picks the wrong one, you're going down and research the wrong line. So one of the things that our chapter has done is the incredible research to make sure that what's in these cemetery books is correct. And Lou and Sally Joseph, for example, did some books on the Jewish cemeteries and received all kinds of awards for our chapter from them. And those are available. They're in the library. They're also available to buy if you want your own. And it's several cemeteries throughout Mahoning County. It's just an incredible research value. And the reason you do that, you go and you find the date somebody died. And sometimes it's just as a year on the tombstone, but if you go to the records, you find the date. Then you can go to the library and find the obituary and find out a lot more about the person and just keep your research going in that way.
Yeah, that, I was going to ask about how would a person get started, I guess. Do you have any recommendations, either of you, about how, what's the first step somebody should
The first step is, as Stacy said, talk to your relatives, your living relatives, and write them down. Then one thing to look at is the U.S. Census records. They go from 1790 all the way up until 1940. The 1950 census records are not released publicly yet.
Right.
The only thing is, in 1890, all of those records were destroyed. And so it's very difficult to, that is right, 1890.
1890.
Yeah. It's very difficult sometimes to make that 20-year jump.
That's a missing decade, yeah. Okay.
But so what's nice about that is there's some alternate things you can do, like tax records, property records, and things that you can sort of use in the absence of the census to place your relative there.
And also, there's some states that have state censuses.
Correct.
Like
okay.
New York. The other thing you've got to remember, though, is especially when you're using Ancestry and Family Search, all of those that are have online and they're indexed, there's several problems. One is many of our ancestors came to this country and couldn't read or write. So when a census taker went to the door, for instance, my great-grandfather, Tom Heher, he wrote down Heher, H-A-R-E. Years ago, it took me months to find that was the correct one.
Right,
But
well, that would be tough.
it is, and so, but that happens a lot. So the census taker writes down the name that he can understand and spells it because they can't spell. So then that census taker writes it down, and then someone years later has indexed that. And so they're trying to get as many names done and indexed as they can. And so they write down what they see the census taker's handwriting.
Right.
They didn't
It
print.
was all in, yeah.
Most
right.
of them wrote,
Right.
so they interpret that. So you've got to be cognizant that what you see, you might want to check, make sure, and what the Ancestry and those others allow you to do is to look at the actual document.
Yes.
And then look at the document, look at the father, the mother, the relatives, sometimes next door, but you can then pinpoint the right.
Right, just from the other.
Correct, yes, but
other
always,
documents.
one older lady, Jocelyn Wilms, who was a member for many, many years, taught us all. She's passed away, but she taught us all that documentation was critical. And so it was like having a test in school with Jocelyn, and the key is documentation. Make sure that you're on, and you can't always do it. Sometimes it's a jump of faith, a leap of faith, but but do the best you can.
Now, we're in the library here. Again, we're coming from the Austintown meeting room. But doesn't the library system have access to, is it Ancestry?
Has access to Ancestry, Family Search, Heritage Search, Heritage Quest, excuse me, and several different other websites that are designed for genealogists that will help them. They even have access to some newspapers where you can look up articles on your ancestors. And there's a variety of different resources, not only online at the main branch of the public library, but they also have a lot of resource books that deal with the military, DAR, Daughters of the American Revolution, and a lot of state history books, which are very important and valuable.
I can tell you that I traveled all over the place over 40 years and looked at a lot of different libraries, a lot of different Carnegie Mellon, all these different. Mahoning County Library System, the main library, probably has one of the best genealogical resources in the area.
Wow.
And we have members that actually work for the library system. And as Stacy said, we have volunteers down there, but the Mahoning Library does an incredible job.
Well, and is it Tim Seaman?
Tim Seaman.
Tim Seaman, yes.
Again, when we're talking about the Thursday afternoon or the Thursday in the library, it's on the second floor.
Correct.
Near the reference area. And then again, you have volunteers at the courthouse.
Yes, in the basement, in the marriage area, marriage
Okay.
department.
Well, I know, Stacy, you have a lot of interest, not beyond, just Mahoning County. You've worked with the Ohio group, and there's something coming up, in a few months, 6 months, less?
Actually, less than. I'm so excited. I am one of the two co-chairs of the 2017 Ohio Genealogical Society Conference. Marlene and Applegate and myself are working together on this. It will be April 26th through 29th, 2017, at Kalahari Resort and Conference Center in Sandusky, Ohio.
Oh, sure, okay.
We're anticipating something like 600, 700 people, and so we are really looking forward to it. For those that are into genealogy that may watch PBS, there's a program called the Genealogy Roadshow, and D. Joshua Taylor, who is one of the three hosts on that program, is going to be our keynote speaker.
Oh, good.
And it is going to be so great to have him. I've met him on a couple of different occasions. Nice young man that actually got interested into genealogy because his grandmother would drag him every summer to all the different libraries she had to do research. And he's now president of the New York Genealogical and Historical Society, and has just made this his calling. He just loves genealogy. Number of wonderful speakers, both on the national and regional level, that are going to be here. We have two additional from the Genealogy Roadshow that'll be talking about different topics. Local presenters as well, so I'm really excited,
Now,
excited.
I believe, isn't the theme is sort of 60s related?
I tell you what, 1967 was the Summer of Love.
Right.
And so this is like, what is it,
It'll be 50 years, yeah.
Yeah, 50-year anniversary of the Summer of Love. So we've incorporated a little bit of everything. We're going to be, the theme is genealogy gone wild. So we will be very casual. We will be wearing flowers in our hair and tie-dye and hippie type of stuff. It is going to be so much fun. And that's what we want to get across to people is, yeah, you're looking at records, you're dealing with documents and everything, but genealogy is fun. Some of the different genealogists over the years I've had a chance to hang out with, and they are some of the most down-to-earth people, but given the fact that you're looking at records, you're dealing with people that are deceased and all this other stuff, you have to be a little, and they just make it so much fun. It's so interesting.
Well, a couple analogies come to mind. One is to be a good genealogist, you're almost like a journalist.
Correct.
You have to have a curiosity. You have to be able to relate to people and to get people's stories and to be able to dig and search for facts. The other thing is it's almost like fishing. You have to be patient, right?
Right.
Would you, Mike, talk about a little bit about some of the characteristics you've seen?
Yeah, for example, there was a family named Orrs, it's my ancestors of my wife, and I hunted for 20 years to try to find out what happened to John and Mary Orr. And finally, their son Stuart I found. This is back after the Civil War. And I found them, and it was incredible once I opened the door because I traced them to Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio, to Illinois, to Muscatine, Iowa, to over in Nebraska. And
you followed them.
I was able to follow them and actually found the gravesite of these people. And but it took you years and years. And so when you're doing this, you do many different families at once because sometimes you just have to put one aside and then move on to the next project. But it's just an incredible amount of research that you have to do. And then what you want to do is you want to be able to tell a story. I mean, it's one thing to have a bunch of names and this, like this person was the father and the grandfather and the great-grandfather. But how did they go from point A to point B? What caused them to do that?
Yes.
And if you were not, if they didn't do that thing, whatever it was, whether they died or went to a certain place, we wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here. Someone else would be there.
Well, yeah, and that's a great point because it's the stories of the people that make our area and who we are. Do you also work? I was just thinking with the Mahoning Valley Historical Society. Are they a good asset for people?
Yes, because what happens is the historical societies give you a flavor of what it was like when people lived there. And your ancestors lived there. You may not have the details of that ancestor of what they did, but you know in general what it was like, what industries were here, how they struggled to make survive in some cases.
Yeah, I mean, you think of Youngstown with the steel industry.
Definitely.
And the migrations of people. You know, my own folks coming from Central Europe, others came from Southern Europe, other people came from the South. And, you know, it was just years and decades of people moving from place to place. And it takes people like yourself, I guess, who are genealogists, to keep track of that, right?
That's right.
Go ahead.
And I was going to say, Bill Lawson and the crew from the Mahoning Valley Historical Society have done a wonderful job with the Tyler History Center and the archives that have now been placed in that building. So it's a wealth of information that help, like you said, better flesh out and tell the story of your ancestors.
Yeah, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, they do have some of those oral histories.
Yes, they do.
On
Yes,
archive.
actually, on one of my other hats at one time, as president of the Industrial Information Institute, we donated all of those to the library system.
Is that
years
right?
ago.
Oh,
Yes.
that's great. Yeah, that's a great resource. Well, again, we're talking with Mike Heher, and he is the president of the Mahoning, well, you give the title.
The Mahoning County chapter of the Ohio Genealogical Society.
Right, and Stacy Adger, who is a trustee.
For the Youngstown District of the Ohio Genealogical Society.
And just a reminder, again, if people were interested, you have meetings, and describe where that is.
It's St. Charles, 7 o'clock every third Monday, except December, July, and August.
Okay.
In our computer interest group, because there's a group
yes.
that meets at 6.
Yes, the computer interest group meets at 6 o'clock, and they talk about issues that happen as you're doing research in your computers. And it's a very interactive group. They also put out any warnings of any hacking and anything that is going on out there at that time. So it's really, really a very nice thing. And sometimes we have the meetings at the Historical Society and the Steel Museum. Every once in a while, we'll have
We'll take our
portable
show on the
meeting.
road.
Yes, a roadshow.
Well, I've seen some of the pictures of the meetings, and about how many people might come to a regular meeting?
We have about 40 people come.
Wow.
But we have 100 members. We have members all over the country. It's like myself. I belong to the Venango County, Pennsylvania, the Jefferson County, New York, the Mercer County Genealogical Society. I belong to all of those. Chautauqua. Yeah.
And you have to. The one thing I did want to say real quick is you can find more information on the Mahoning County chapter at www.mahoningcountychapterogs.org.
Okay.
And then if you want information on the state organization, we're www.ogs.org. The Mahoning County chapter has a link to the state chapter and vice versa, where you can learn out more. Make sure you check out the main page for OGS, because there is a link to the 2017 state conference. We would love to have you there.
Yeah, thank you very much, Stacy and Mike.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Again, if you're interested in more detailed knowledge of genealogy, these are the folks to go see, and we appreciate them coming on. Again, I'm Bill Adams. I'm your host for Senior Focus. We come to you a couple of times each month through Armstrong's Channel 20 and 100. Thank you to Greg Roten, who puts the show on the air. Thanks also to the public library, who allows us to use their meeting rooms. Till next time, thanks to you for watching. Appreciate it.